This month we are going to do as usual, starting with the topics related with the latest versions of PHP. Um, PHP 5.6 end of life has reached, but there was one last version in December. So it will enter in security only fixes from now on.
I just want to add one more thing about it. I just noticed under standard, there is HTTP stream wrapper should ignore HTTP 100 continue code. I think we actually discussed about this in some previous podcast when someone complained that HTTP stream wrapper does not support HTTP 2 protocol.
Yeah.
So I think this fix is related to it. They're listening and they're fixing. Nice.
Yes, I thought they would be doing that for future versions, but okay, that is also fine. Anyway, there was yet another PHP 7.0 release, and there was the first 7.1 release. There was not yet an update, but there probably will be one soon, one each month. We already talked about PHP 7.1 release, but there are other things that are important to know. I already mentioned the end of life of PHP 5.6. There will be still 2 more years of security fixes support. So don't panic, but I already heard people complaining that their hosting companies have forced them to upgrade to PHP 7.0. It seems somebody already panicked, but well, that's the way it goes. Anyway, moving on, we have an article that we already mentioned last month, but this time we're going to take a look at it closer, which is an article about how the PHP performance evolved over time, at least since PHP 5. And we'll be talking about also what improvements happened in these versions to explain why the performance improved. Next, we are going to start talking about the usual set of proposals for the next PHP versions. We'll talk first about a concept that is being proposed. I don't know if it is going to be approved, but okay, it's a bit confusing, but they call it magic casting, which would allow to cast objects from one type to the expected type in PHP 7 by calling a cast double underscore cast function. It's a bit confusing how it works, but we'll get back to this when we talk about this proposal. Then we have just an RFC that somehow is basically a proposal to update the documentation about error codes of throwable errors, and basically this is to mention that some error codes could be usually numbers, but could also be strings. So this is probably more a documentation update than an actual feature. Then we'll get back to an old proposal that did not pass in the past. It's like people vote on proposals and then they get back to them later, a few months, when they failed to pass in the previous time. Maybe somebody agrees, maybe somebody changed their mind. But this one is specifically about property assessor syntax, which is a syntax that somewhat is inspired in .NET to define how variables of a class can be set using functions defined inside the class. Then there is a proposal, an RFC, which is also a bit hard to understand because you need to know how PHP works a bit internally. For instance, when I establish a database connection, it returns a resource value, which is in practice an integer, but they want to make it an object. They call it hash context. It's either this or I'm not understanding this feature, but we'll get back to this ahead. Then finally, we'll talk about a proposal for what is called decorative classes. These classes, it's to follow the decorative pattern, which is usually implemented with a subclass that works, defines functions that may be called before and after another function that is being decorated. So the proposal is to add a new keyword called decorates to make it more explicit that this is a decorated pattern